U.S. Space Force officer was relieved of his command after he made comments about his new book, which claims Marxist ideology is influencing the military. NTD's Christina Kim speaks to a veteran who says this is sending the wrong message to our adversaries.
Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lohmeyer was relieved from his post on Friday after he spoke on a podcast about his new book. He criticized the Defense Secretary's agenda to promote critical race theory within the military in recent months. The Space Force said the decision was based on a loss of trust and confidence in his ability to lead. Lohmeyer's book is #1 on Amazon's bestsellers list and is currently sold out. Special Forces veteran, author, and head of a security think tank, Jim Hansen, says Lohmeyer's writings weren't in line with the military's new stance.
I think the fact that the U.S. military has decided that members of its officer corps are not allowed to express constitutionally protected speech in their off time is a serious problem. And I think, in addition, it's a message to our enemies right now that they are more committed to being woke than they are to being mission capable.
Hansen says woke ideologies, including critical race theory and anti-racism, are simply new flavors of Marxism. Teaching this to the military is using the enemy's weapons against the country. He says this ideology will break the camaraderie that's necessary to carry out missions.
It didn't matter to me what color someone's skin was. What mattered to me was, could they pull their weight in the mission we were trying to accomplish? And if they could, I could have cared less. And that's now come into question because they're telling people that if you're black, you're being held back. And if you're white, you're an oppressor. That is not how you build the kind of esprit de corps a military unit needs and the morale that a unit needs to be able to have its people look at each other as individuals, not as members of some identity politics class.
Hansen says these teachings have infiltrated other sectors of society, like the education system.
Socialist-derived ideologies and governing principles have never worked anywhere on earth. They've been implemented, and they never will, because that's not how humans work.
He says we need to return to meritocracy in the government and military, but it's going to take time to wake people back up from wokeness. Christina Kim, NTD News.
And a retired naval intelligence officer also speaks out. He says this widespread infiltration of identity politics won't strengthen our troops.
Lieutenant Stephen Rogers says in his 25 years of military service, he has never seen anything like this.
As a military officer who's retired from the Navy, it was very troubling to see a U.S. military general relieve someone from command because he merely spoke out against Marxism, communism, if you will. When I joined the military several years ago, we were told that the Marxists and the communists were our enemies. Now, not only am I very disturbed about this, but I've spoken to many veterans and many American citizens who love our country and who absolutely despise Marxism and communism. They're equally as shocked.
In recent months, we've seen more and more identity politics and critical race theory in the U.S. military and intelligence communities. It usually appears in the form of inclusion, diversity, and equity, and it's sparked outrage and concern among many Americans. Critical race theory draws heavily upon Marxist theories. It denounces Western culture as a form of oppression, and it applies the Marxist tactic of class struggle to divide people by race, gender, sexual orientation, and ethnicity to label them oppressors and the oppressed. Rogers says it appears the U.S. military is embracing this ideology by relieving this commanding officer and investigating whether his comments constituted prohibited partisan political activity.
We used to have military commanders who would stand up for this country, stand up for freedom of speech, stand up for the troops, stand against communism, socialism, and Marxism. And what we have here is the complete opposite.
Last week, over 120 retired generals, admirals, and military officers signed a letter warning that the U.S. is embroiled in an existential fight between Marxism and constitutional freedom. Rogers is also urging more Americans to stand up and fight for America's freedoms and values. He says the first step is prayer, second, action.
There's a God above who loves this country. I believe in the power of prayer, but also we need to put our faith to work. Get involved, really get involved. Run for office, Get involved with political candidates who are more interested in the American agenda rather than in an agenda of some politician or of Marxism and communism. And let me just make one thing really clear. Marxism, communism is indeed, in this century, a very clear, real, and present danger to the United States of America. We should not underestimate what the Chinese Communist Party and others are trying to do to our country. That should cause us concern, but it should also cause us to unite, and with all our might, with all our heart, soul, and spirit, is to fight them and send them back where Reagan sent the Soviet Communist Party into the ash bin of history.